All right, welcome everybody to episode 16 of the Arizto Spotlight. We're continuing our BSM series, and today we have Sean Powell. For anybody watching who doesn't know Sean would just introduce yourself, mate.
Well, I'm Sean, obviously. I'm 53 years young, married to my beautiful wife, Serena, and together we're raising two awesome teenagers, and Maddie, who is 17 next month, and an aspiring rock star. Jaden is 13 and is actually just getting back from camp in about half an hour's time.
Oh yeah.
And he is already taller than mum and only about 3 centimeters off me, and I'm about 179. So he's 13 and really tall and eating us out of house and home and an aspiring basketballer. So
Awesome, man. And you're based in Christchurch, right?
we're based in Christchurch. Yeah, we're a little bit about probably about 20 to 25 minutes west of the city in a little town, not so little anymore, called Rolleston,
Yeah.
part of the Selwyn district, which is a couple of years ago was probably one of the fastest growing districts in New Zealand. I'm not sure if that's the case, but yeah, no, we love it out here.
Oh, awesome, man. And so you've got an exciting life, two teenagers that you obviously spoke about. How do you juggle raising a family with not only your real estate career, your future rock star, growing teenagers, but also now as a BSM as well? How do you juggle that?
Very interesting. Very interestingly, like no 2 days are the same. You've got to be good at scheduling and fitting everything in. So, working a calendar is vitally important because there's various not only there's various school activities and sleepovers and play date. Oh, I don't call them play dates anymore. They'll kill me. That sort of thing, and then fitting in various BSM meetings and my own sales career as well. It's a juggling act. Got to be good at juggling. Got to be good at scheduling and planning. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And so being kind of based out of Rolleston, obviously, if anybody not doesn't know, it's just west of Christchurch. What is it like kind of living and working in such a rapidly growing area in that Selwyn district and has that kind of impacted your real estate work?
It's been really good because I've actually been involved in Raleigh since my very first, since I first got into real estate because we sold section when I was at my previous company, we sold sections out here. So I've seen this town grow from the small existing township that it was to, you know, a bustling, almost city-size town that it is now. And to watch that growth, it has actually been phenomenal. And be part of it, and to have sold, so many sections and so much real estate out here has been, a privilege and an interesting process. And to watch something grow, just to go from A to B, basically, is quite interesting to watch. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And because so who were you with before you came to Arizona? You don't have to mention it
Professionals,
if you don't want to. Yeah, yeah,
but no,
professionals.
no, no, absolutely no professionals. Yeah, and we're going to go down that road now. I started there with at the young age of 24.
Wow.
Um, very, career job wise before that, but I think that was probably, I felt almost that it was a little bit young back then. I
Mm,
know that real estate, the average age of a real estate agent today is probably a lot younger than what it was when I started.
mm.
When I started, I was very, very much a youngster.
Yeah.
And spent a lot of time with professionals. Had a very very good manager, and I think that's one of the key things with anybody starting out in the industry is to make sure that you're under the wing of a good manager that is interested in your growth and interested in you doing
Yeah.
well. And he certainly was.
Yeah.
Fostered that environment and you know gave that environment and the support to be able to grow and succeed.
Absolutely. And when you came across to Arizto, I know you did 12 sales in your first year without bringing a client base across, right? So talk about that. How were you able to manage that and build momentum
Yeah,
so
I think
quickly?
that'll be the same for a lot of guys that are coming across where you don't have that database and not or you don't or you're not allowed to bring it across. But I think everything, Martin, is activity based. So you've just got to work. Like reward is a result of effort and they're directly comparable. They're tied to each other. So you put the effort in and you get the reward out of it. It's just you've just got to put that effort in. So that was letterbox dropping. It was strategically though, I probably did one thing that was a borderline, but um, where while I wasn't allowed to contact my database, I certainly knew where a lot of them lived. So I went strategically. Letterbox dropped their street
Of
um,
course.
with Aristo flyers,
If you collect
and of
them into your
course,
database again, yeah,
yeah.
no issue.
So out of that 12, like interesting, one was a company lead. The rest were people that had been on my database, so repeat referral business again. And I think that's the key. If you do a good enough job, they'll remember who you are. And if you've
Mm,
moved company, they'll find you.
mm,
If you've left that good, that big an impression on them,
mm.
they'll find you. And that's basically what was happening. It was all repeat referral business that I'd had from the past.
Awesome. 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 And that I completely agree with that. A lot of agents I find when they change brands, they worry a lot about like a big question I get a lot of is when they change brands, should I go through my old Facebook photos and delete all the stuff from the old brand? And I go, don't worry about it. Like people know that you change brands and it's just what things happen. And people put a lot of ownership or onus on the brand is why I'm successful, but it's actually the activity that you've put in. It's your personal brand that makes you successful. I think
100%.
the brand helps you get the listing, but it doesn't get you in the door.
No,
Would you agree
the
with
first
that?
sale, yeah, absolutely, 100%, Martin. The first sale you make in real estate is yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the company, not the brand. It's you,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they'll buy you.
Mm,
One of the reasons that Anna does so well, they buy her. They
mm,
buy into to her, and it's the same for everybody. If you've got that personality, if if you're passionate about it and you believe in what you're doing, it'll come across in what you do. And
mm,
it's one of the key things.
mm. Let's talk about your personal journey, mate. You grew up in Canterbury. You said you've got a deep love for the region, especially when it comes to the Crusaders and Canterbury rugby,
Absolutely,
right?
one-eyed Canterbury.
Yeah, yeah. And so, how do you think growing up in such a dynamic, changing place like Christchurch has shaped your career?
It's certainly been challenging. Like, not only I won't touch too much on my personal life, but that had its challenges, as I'm sure we all do. But Canterbury itself obviously has had its challenges as well. And I think that um, that just you get. They always say the measure of a person is not what happens to them. It's how you get through it,
Mm,
how you rise through it, and I think one of the things that you've got to have is that adaptability and perseverance, probably the two key words for anybody in any industry, because things will change.
mm,
Markets will change, the economy changes, the environment changes, how your personal life changes.
mm,
So if you can't adapt, pivot, and change and adjust and persevere, then you won't succeed. That's where true success comes.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just the
Very well said.
ability to be able to pivot, look at what you're doing, and change it as this your surroundings change.
Mm. I think that's one thing Aristo does very well. Even before myself being in this role, I'm a lot more across making actual decisions. But even before this, when I was relying on the directors to make decisions, we've always made decisions fast, and things don't have take too long to get done and stuff like that. So I completely agree with you. You've had a bit of a varied career from supermarkets to accounting to you said you worked with your dad and ACC compensation. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, how did all of those different experiences prepare you for what you're doing now?
Um, yeah, so like straight out of school, I went from I got a job at the local supermarket. I was only there for about 6 months, and I'd gone for an interview in an accounting office, missed that one, and got referred from them. I got second, I think, in that interview process onto another company, actually a bigger company, interestingly enough. Was still very young. I'd skipped a year somewhere along my lines in my school life from changing schools and managed to keep up. But going into the workforce, I was still 17. A
Mm,
lot of my colleagues my friends were all 18, and I was still partying. And I went into this accounting office and learned very quickly that being tied down to an office at that stage in my career was not me, and it was showing. So they let me go. I was there for about 2 years, and I remember walking into the social welfare office as it was back then, looking at the job boards. All there were was commission sales,
mm,
and I thought to myself, as a 19, 20-year-old, I can't do that. There's
mm,
no way you'll get me doing commission selling. And so from there, I went and worked in a bar and in a bakery doing night shift packing and driving for a bakery.
mm,
And on my nights off, I'd work in a bar. good social skills. Like I was quite timid and I was quite not yeah introverted. So working in a bar really forced me to come out of my shell because you've got to talk to people, and it was one of the key factors in real estate. You know, you've got to
Mm.
be able to talk. I was still a little bit introverted and reserved getting into real estate, but that really does soon smack it out of you. Like you can't afford to be. You've got to
Yeah.
talk to people. So um, yeah, so a lot of varied work there. Doing the ACC lump sum compensation thing was really actually quite good because what that involved was just interviewing clients, finding out about their pain and suffering, and writing submissions about that and submitting it to ACC on behalf of half of them. And if they were paid a lump sum claim, we'd take 10%. If they didn't get a claim, that we'd charge them nothing. But that interview process and getting to know people and drilling down to what their problems were, I think is one of the key things about real estate. You've got to talk
Mm.
to people, find out what their motivation is, and so that certainly helped in that regard as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, cool,
And
cool.
then that came to an end. Lump sum compensation came to an end, and Dad said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I don't really know." At that stage, I was, 24. He said, "Well," and he'd been in real estate. He'd done it for a few years. He said, "Why don't you give real estate a go?" And I hadn't really thought about it. And he said, "Why don't you give it a go?" And I said, "Okay." So that's the rest is history. I started with a company that was then called Professionals Kennard Real Estate, but became Professionals Christchurch. And I stayed there for 27 and a half years.
Wow, and the rest is history, mate.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that working in a bar brought you out of your shell. Very similar experience, mate. I was a bit introverted out of high school. Didn't have a lot of friends, and I was bullied a lot in high school. And so I went, and my first experience being 18, being in like a bar on a busy Friday night, I went, "This is fucking cool." And I started working in bars, and I worked in bars till I was about 24 before I went to work at DHL. So even maybe 25, I think, until I worked in bars.
You will have seen some sites as well. Like the bar that I worked at was a student pub, huge, big
Mm,
student pub.
mm.
And man, it opened my eyes, I tell you.
Mate, I worked in downtown Auckland in the nightclubs and bars, right? So I did some
Yeah.
time in restaurants, some time in bars, and some time in nightclubs. I was doing one of the busiest bars in Auckland, Viaduct, during the 2011 Rugby World Cup
Oh,
in New
wow.
Zealand,
Yeah.
right? So we
Awesome.
had hundreds of thousands of people on the streets, and it was just it wasn't just mental on the opening ceremony and the closing ceremony. It was mental for 3 months. You
I
know
would
what I
have probably
mean?
seen you because we had conferences up in Auckland all the time. I was there all the time. We always ended up on the viaduct and in many of those bars. So there's a good chance I would have seen
Yeah,
you on TV.
probably. Yeah, probably. There you go. Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so you already said you what oh, you kind of already covered some of these things I broke down here, mate. That's all right. So let's talk about your success, right? So you perseverance, adaptability. You've talked about some of these things being traits that you credit for your success. Can you share a story where these qualities have helped you overcome a specific challenge, or does anything come to mind of something that you've really had to maybe work hard for a deal? Even in life or in real estate.
I think that it's probably the story that I remember the most is one where an earthquake damaged house and been we'd been repaired, and I listed this particular property, and it was one of two that were the garages were very very close. It was actually a strange situation because it was two sisters, sorry, sister and sister-in-law, not even sisters, but they bought this 1,000 square meter section in a new subdivision that we sold all the sections in, and built these two houses side by side, garage to garage. One of them stacked up reasonably well in the earthquake. The other one hadn't and needed to be repaired, and it got repaired, but they couldn't lift it and redo the foundation underneath it. They had to basically they gutted the inside of it and dug out the concrete foundation and redid the slab and put everything back. So I came to list it, and the first sale fell over. Uh, I mean, we disclosed everything, but they got cold feet just on the amount of work that had been done to it. They pulled away, kept it on the market. Second sale got through the point of doing the limb, found that hadn't, and we weren't big on doing huge information packs back then, so we hadn't got the property file. Didn't know that there was no code compliant or no final sign off for the code compliance certificate. And that turned out to be the case. So building inspector came back, a few issues on it, and that deal crashed. But I sat with the vendors, talked them through the process, what they needed to do to get it back on the market. Next time, got it under contract. It was a purchase. The purchasers were separating. The wife was buying the husband out. It was a property in Ahoka, which was a big
It's
lifestyle
complex at both ends, mate.
block. And
Wow.
he was waiting and waiting and waiting for her to pay out. There were delays through the lawyer. I think she was stalling. And in the end, he pulled the pin because he just couldn't keep my vendors waiting any longer. So finally got it
No.
sold the fourth time. But, because of um, my ability to talk with the owners and talk them through the process and have faith in the in my ability, but also the knowledge around what they needed to do to get the deal across the line and advise them. It was just one of those things. The whole thing around the earthquakes is probably the single biggest one because you had to be adaptable. First of all, you had income that took a hit. Um, we were fortunate enough that our boss got us into doing inspections in properties for absentee landlords who weren't able to inspect their property. So we would go through, have a look at what the damage was. Um, Certainly not pretending to be building inspectors or anything of the like, but just note down any visible damage we saw so that they could mention that when they were putting claims into
Mm.
EQC. And we got paid for each of those inspections. So
Oh, cool.
that substitute, that supplemented our
Subsidizes things
income
for you.
a
Yeah.
little bit. But just learning what you needed to do, the compliance side. I had two deals in both earthquakes. I had one and both had confirmed. September's one, that one got liquefaction around the property. So, and one of the other things was that the solicitors were out of action pretty much. So we were almost doing conveyancing as well. So
Mm,
it's
mm.
if you can't adapt to these things and adjust very very quickly, you soon sink. And it is a single. So that was like my first night working in the bar, Martin. They threw me in the deep end on a Friday night in the public bar, and said, here you go. I'd had 3 days work experience, and that was it.
Mm.
And they said, here you go. And it's true, you sink or swim.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that that's an inherent ability to adapt and persevere. You haven't got it. You can work on it and you can get it, but you need to
Yeah.
have it
Yeah, I completely agree with you, man. I've got some good stories from the bars, but I'll save them
another
for
day.
when someone does my interview for one of these things. Um,
Good
yeah,
idea.
you said after 27 years in real estate, sorry, after 27 years of professionals, you making the move to Arizto must have been a pretty big decision for you, mate. So what was it that, aside from Danny's good persuasion skills, which I'm sure most of the people watching know about,
Yes.
what made you decide to jump ship and how's it been for you since?
Look, initially, interestingly enough, because Anna was at Professionals with me and we interviewed with Dan at exactly the same time. Now, Anna jumped ship then. It took me a year. I was a little bit reserved. I'm extremely loyal, as you can see, 27 and a half years with one company. It took me a lot to get my head around the general agency side of thing, to be honest.
Mm.
Because when I started in real estate, generals were a thing back then, but they were slowly dying. And we were encouraged to go out and get sole agencies only. If we brought back a general agency, our boss, just said, I don't want it. So,
I do have a good story about that, right? I met the founder of Eve's Real Estate, right?
yep,
And his name was Eve, right?
yep,
His surname was Eve, but he's long retired and it was at Soul Bar in Auckland. This was only last year, maybe the year before, and he was just at the bar having a drink, and I got talking to him. It turned out he was the founder of Eve's, and he was one of the people that originally introduced the very first sole agencies in the 70s, right?
wow.
And I talked to him, and obviously my strong values of Aristo are why I think generals are better. That conversation started, and he agreed with me, right? And he said the reason they did sole agencies, it wasn't to get exclusive access to the listing and lock the vendor into contracts. The reason they brought in sole agencies was because everybody was advertising, because in those days it was on newspapers, right? That's the only way you could advertise was newspaper. And all the ads would have different prices and different information. And there were just cowboys out there putting the wrong information about the listing out.
No
So the
consistency.
whole Soul Agency was about creating consistency and controlling the marketing, not about locking people into contracts, right? And so it's interesting that you were saying that. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted your story
I
about why
know
you
that's all good. Yeah, that's interesting to hear the history around it. That's actually really
Mm,
fascinating. But
mm,
it was difficult, and it took me a year. But truly, look, it's probably not probably. It's definitely been the best thing that I could have done. I should have done it at the same time as Anna.
mm.
Um, but I absolutely love what Arizto offers, the opportunities and the doors that it's opening up for me, and I get to share my knowledge and experience with a team of salespeople now that I'm passionate about helping them reach their real estate goals now, albeit a little bit different from sort of like buyers and sellers. But I feel that's a natural progression for me, and I'm really relishing the role and being involved with this fast growing, advanced real estate company.
Mm. What was it that kind of shift pushed you over the edge? From I'm not sure about the general sole agency thing. What was it that made you go, yeah, I'm going to finally make the jump?
I told myself not to be so stupid. I just told myself, look, it's me that's got the problem.
Yeah.
And and I could see that Anna was, we Anna and I kept in touch, and she was talking about it, and I could see that she was starting to do reasonably well, and the more that I thought about it, the more that I thought, and where I was starting to get unhappy, and I've looked at other companies, and I've been approached, I've been chased by someone in Ray White for a long, long, long time. Had several interviews over the years, but one of the things that I really, really liked about Aristo was the fee structure. And I think one of the reasons that I was losing business a lot was, and with professionals, we had a fairly good fee. Like, it was actually a capped fee. So we weren't as high as some of the franchises were, because we're a co-op. Professionals are a co-op, not a franchise. So that fee side of it, and I know that our company was dying a slow death. That doesn't get out, but anyway, he it was just time to go,
Mm.
and I should have made the move a year earlier, but I'm glad I made it when I did, and I've made a fist of it, and I'm not looking back on any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Likewise. And so let's talk about, you've already kind of touched on mentorship and advice. Let's get specific for any salespeople looking to kind of grow their business. Your advice boils down to three things. I think you planning, adaptability, and also being able to say next. Right? Can you dive into a little bit of that and why you think that advice is crucial for anyone wanting to succeed?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, those three things, they are what I mean. There's no hard fast plan, and it is different for different people. But I think ultimately these three things are what I think are the key to growing your business. Um, you got to have a plan. Touched a little bit about on that, and you've got to be diligent in working that plan. Businesses fail because they just don't plan. They
Mm,
don't have an effective business plan. So set it down and be diligent at working at it. Um, and we've talked about adaptability and perseverance. Adaptability is key because market will change, the economy will change, and we've talked about that. So if you can't move with that and adjust or pivot, I like to say pivot. You're going in one direction, something changes. You've got to analyze what you're doing and say, is this still relevant now? And if it's not, pivot and see what you can do differently and put it into your plan and work it. Um, the third one, I think, is something that's probably not talked about enough. And salespeople have an exaggerated ego to be loved, and so it's very easy for us to get hurt and knocked back, and it happens in all shapes, all sides. Every time you've done an appraisal, you miss that appraisal, or a deal crashes. We see a sign on one that you've appraised down the road the other day, and they didn't tell you that they were going with that company, or even that they had interviewed with that company. So those things all hurt. You've got to be able to reflect, but you have a look, learn from perhaps what's happened. Don't dwell on it too much, but reflect and learn. I think are the two key things. What can I do differently so that doesn't
mm,
happen again? And take some time out and refresh. Everybody knows what it's like when you go into a listing prison and you're really on, like you're really switched on. You've been listening to some amped up music in the car or what have you, and you walk in there and you're so fired up
mm,
and so on your game, and you come out and you win the business, and you're like, wow, why can't I do that every time?
mm,
Whatever that is for you, or whatever that looks like for you, make that a regular thing. Put it into your business plan.
yeah.
Have some time out, reflect, energize, refresh, and just go and get it. Plan. The other thing I think we don't do enough is when you look at the media, and it's hard to look at media and stay positive these days, but you got to look at the signs, because we all know when a change in the market is likely to come and
Mm,
when it's coming. The
mm,
signs are always there. Probably more so for me because I've been in it for so long and I've seen every kind of market. So I pick up on those things perhaps a little bit more.
mm,
Um, the ability to plan ahead of that
mm,
and get yourself ahead of the game is one of the key strategies, I think, to growing your business. So you can take advantage when the market changes. And I'm not talking about changing for good. I'm also talking about when it changes for the bad. There are
mm,
things that you could put in place to make sure that you are successful in that time.
mm,
And other salespeople, when that change hits, they're busy floundering around wondering what day it is and where they're going to go for a coffee today. It's too late.
mm, mm.
Put that plan in place and ahead of time, and start working it now, and you'll be better positioned to take advantage of when the market changes. And remember, say next or moving on. Don't
Yeah.
dwell on a kickback or a knockback.
Mm.
You've got to be able to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Really well said, mate. Well, awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate your time today. I think it's been a good chat. I think I know that everybody watching is going to get a heap of value out of it. So thank you so much. You guys
Absolute
obviously,
pleasure.
yeah, awesome. And everybody watching, you want to get in touch with Sean as per everybody else, you can, I'm sure that he'll be willing to take a call or anything like that. So awesome.
Thank you, Martin. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, mate. Thanks everybody watching, and we'll see you next week for I think will be episode 17. Thanks a lot.